Born from the resolve of one man and fueled by a successful Kickstarter on May 2020, Alisa is a survival horror game that takes insights from the classics of the genre while keeping it somehow modern. Some might not be able to see past its glaring flaws, but those who decide to stick for the ride will have a short yet replayable experience that is just a few more patches away from greatness. I had to be honest, I don't really like the original Resident Evil trilogy. I'm intimately familiar with them in their entirety, and I acknowledge them as great games, yet the gameplay never caught my attention. With the puzzles being too basic, the combat actively trying to be avoided, and the repeated traversal over the same rooms door after door after door doesn't help the fact. Don't get me wrong, I like my slow-paced media, some of my favorites are certainly in that category, but I'm an action man by default. I can't help but want to shoot things when given a chance, which might be enough to give me an American visa should I ever need one. It is weird then how Alisa caught my eye. You can instantly see within a single frame of its trailer that it mainly takes inspiration from the original Resident Evil, with that characteristic early 90s CG plastic aesthetic, framed within various angles of each room with its compression and crushed color banding backgrounds. Even so, the setting was enough to get me interested. The self-titled protagonist, coupled with a posh appearance, might clue you into further implications, but the game quickly goes to create an identity of its own, shedding its original inspiration from the 1988 surreal adaptation of Alice by Czech director Jan Švankmajer. By the hands of Casper Crows, with help from Alisa for the music and giving the voice to the protagonist, this further proves that some games can only be pulled off by the sacrifices of one or two individuals, as to keep the final release as close to the initial concept as possible. Always be respect for those who manage to make it to the end. Games like Salt and Sanctuary and Hotline Miami always come to mind for this kind of topic, and they certainly deserve the mention. I wasn't aware of the Kickstarter when it was happening, though considering the time frame for the world, it sure was a big gamble. But I did play it when it was originally released on Steam. Back then, I only went as far as the first boss, as life took my attention away to other matters, as it often does. But since then, I had it tucked away in a corner of my mind for later. And with the fortunate coincidence of catching a retweet for the announcement of the developer's cut, I decided that now was finally the time to go back right into it. Opening with a secret meeting of the elite royal forces for an unknown country. It's explained that a spy got away by train with some important blueprints, and that they are to be deployed along the line in groups to search for the intruder. One of them being the titular Alisa, who's accompanied by the toothpick chewing caricature Pierre, while they get off on a station near a quiet little village. I really like this starting section, with a peaceful environment giving you a tense-free moment to explore while you get a feel of the controls and get to know the characters.
Don't you love the smell of burning wood in the morning?
Yes, I like it.
After all, where there is burning wood, there might be baguette.
Shh, I'll get hungry.
You know what this game, especially this part, reminds me of? Ecstatica. That's it. I only wanted to mention it, and I shall not elaborate further on it. After confirming that the spy ran away into the nearby woods, you give chase after him and end up being assaulted by some spooky dolls that pull into the ground, leaving you with a great title drop. I fucking love title drops, and this one is a certified A+. You can trust me on that. Later, waking up in a strange room and dressed with baby's first Lolita dress bought from Etsy, it's Alisa's mission to figure out what is happening in his weird mansion while trying to survive its impending dangers. While you are giving a gun and a sword at the beginning, after the prologue ends you are stripped of both, only to be offered the gun right back by some unknown generous soul. Not even one room into the adventure, and you are instantly confronted with your first reference. Don't worry, the game is not always like this. After hopefully not wasting all of your bullets, you gather up the enemy's insides and discover that this works as the game currency. Tooth wheels. Makes me wish the developer leaned a bit more on his Belgium roots. Like how instead of just cogs or gears, he translated the Dutch word, tandwiel, which is literally a wheel with teeth, creating a unique amalgamation of words that give the world of the game some personality. Right next door is the game's first save point, where the main shop is located, and manned by a puppet called Paul, who explains that you are in this appropriately titled dollhouse, and that you can trade tooth wheels for some rewards. He is also your save point, but instead of having to carry a separate consumable item for that, you just pay one single tooth wheel. Cause, you know, he doesn't do it for free.
Like this one, I might be able to exchange them for some extra firepower.
I love this little guy like you wouldn't believe, and I wish there were more cutscenes with him. Not really a topic I should comment on, as my own initiation is god-awful, but the voice acting is pretty endearing, even if a bit stiff. It's hard not to love the meek yet smarmy charms of Alisa, while she's driven to meet this absurd cast of characters.
What? After you tried to kill me?
It's you who killed me.
You don't look so dead.
From her own caricature of a partner, to this stranger danger school play and puppet that trades you items for the inner machinations of the enemies, who I believe has memorable lines at the level of the Resident Evil 4 merchant.
Got something that might interest you. Got a selection of good things on sale, stranger.
Welcome.
After introducing you to Charlotte, the airdrop that works as your storage compartment across the mansion, you are left to your own devices to explore the mansion and its secrets by your own. As in true Resident Evil fashion, you should be interacting with every little suspicious detail, as sometimes when you inspect something more than once, you can get some extra stuff out of it, which is a pretty neat reward for exploring. Believe me when I tell you that you'll need every bit of help that you can get, as there is no difficulty setting and the game is tuned to be a hard experience, at least until you find the rhythm to each enemy encounter. While there's a variety of puzzle items, most of the progress blockers are locked doors that need specific keys, which you can find throughout the adventure and are all organized into this neat keyring, so get to it. You should have noticed that you can buy your sword back by a pretty small price, and if you are a survival horror veteran, you should also know how useful it is, because it's a weapon that never runs out of bullets. Killing all your enemies with it, while saving the bullets for tougher situations, should garner you some savings that will be useful for later. This also brings the topic of the game's balance. As you can only carry 2 weapons on you, most of the time you will want to use a gun and a melee weapon, for when you run out of bullets. But I believe it would just be better to have the sword permanently on you after you buy it back, and leave the 2 weapon slots for other weapons. Not only it will prevent players from getting stuck in a situation where they don't have bullets and no means of attack, but I would try the other weapons I wasn't so sure of. With all my 4 playthroughs, I never tried out the blunderbuss or the rifle, because I got too comfortable with the sword and the pistol combo. Yeah, at the same time, I really like how the same game can turn from survival horror to action after your first go around. Not just the actual New Game Plus option, but your experience as a player. You go from trying to conserve your resources while evading each of the house's denizens, until you realize that you gotta spend money to make money. Heather would be proud. After exploring all the available rooms at the beginning, you should be able to buy back the Elite Royal uniform, or one of the other dresses available from Paul, which not only are cute but also give extra bonuses that can further help you customize your own playstyle. You can also just not use any of them, which... Oh yeah! Solving your first puzzle, you go deeper into the mansion and enter the first section, the circus, an example of the game's great collection of set pieces that are both terrifying and mesmerizing. I like to believe the entire game maintains this level of quality, but of course, it's not without its flaws. The bosses, for example, seem to be the most agreed upon weakest element of the entire game. Some aesthetical great designs, but the actual challenge of the battles is quickly overshadowed by caveats that are otherwise staples of the genre. There are just too many camera changes in all of the bosses' arenas, making it severely disorientating to fight, especially if you're forced into a situation where you run out of bullets and are forced to take a melee approach, which might not be the best option for bosses because their hitboxes are kinda finicky. While exploring to solve your way to the first boss, you encounter this macabre doll inside a glass case, and when you grab one of the key items in the adjacent room, the expected happens. This triggers the game's nemesis enemy, I know some people don't like how much pressure this type of enemy creates, like in the remake of Resident Evil 2, but I believe Alisa manages to find a good halfway point for this. For this point forward, there's a chance that she'll appear to chase you, with the only clue being the music changing. You might think this ruins the surprise, but I actually lost count of the amount of times that the change was so subtle that I didn't notice right away, only to spook myself when I saw her silently sliding towards me. Overall, it's a great variation of this system, and it's not like it overstays its welcome by staying until the end of the game. After a certain part, she disappears, so it's not like it can bother you all of the time. She is also associated with a side quest that you might miss on your first playthrough, but that is great for the further development of the game's lore. After the first boss, you unlock a new shop puppet that you can freely switch between, who will let you buy one of various specific rewards from each boss. Also, you can buy and equip Alisa with body modifications.
If I need your body, I'll fuck it.
Not wanting to spoil everything from this point forward, I'll just talk about a few more specific points that I find worth of addressing. Like, some puzzle labs are a bit of a bother, which only become more aggravating in further replays. For example, the puzzle after the first boss, where you're forced to walk back and forth from one point of the circus to the other, I feel that could have been better handled, or the position of each item made closer to each other. What will probably keep me from replaying it more often is the garden maze. As it stands, the gate opening sequence forcing you to go back and forth several times is too much of a nuisance, especially when you take in consideration that you have to use some of the buttons multiple times, making the whole ordeal really confusing if you stop playing in the middle of this part. Some enemies can stun lock you to death, and this creates a situation where the balance is kinda wonky in that regard. Mostly because this problem doesn't happen if you use the modern controls instead of the intended tank controls, enabling you to dodge everything with ease, was it not for the several camera cuts making the difficult task by itself. This also reminds me that running should be the default movement action and walk should be the one used when you press the button. You're 90% of the time running, so no reason to be holding a button for that long. Another small complaint that kept bothering me is when you don't have all of the keys, you should be able to go around the keychain, instead of making me go through all of the keys again to get to the one in the opposite side. Sometimes, the camera is so far away that the low resolution render makes it hard to know which way Alisa is facing, making dodging enemies complicated. I am aware that in more recent patches you can increase the resolution further, but even the developer agrees that this spoils the aesthetic, so we are left in this bottleneck of a situation. And for last, there should be a better system for making sure that you're aiming correctly. The orange reticle in the corner forces you to take your attention away from the action, and when things get frantic, it's hard to line up shots, especially when you're being chased by multiple enemies. Maybe make the gun glint or something like that. Also, the auto aim, which I don't recommend using, is kinda wonky, and I had some bad experiences with it when using it in tandem with some of the weapons, like the spear. Of course, it's not all bad things. I love all the small details that the game has, like how if you point your weapon to pull, it ducks away, only to carefully peek for a brief moment before coming back. Or how when you kill the glass enemies, they shatter into little pieces that you can step on, but if you're barefoot, the glass actually hurts you. And in one of the bosses, if you only take melee weapons, the boss acknowledges that, and doesn't use her full moveset for respect of a fair battle between the two. With the release of the developer's cut, there are new dresses, enemies, weapons, 3 endings plus an extra variation on one of them, and other improvements. I'm aware that the man can't keep working on this forever, but I hope that he can further polish this up with some balanced changes, because the game is already pretty good as it is. Good enough for me to make a video about it, but it can definitely improve. As it stands, Alisa is a great game that is easier to recommend for the classic Resident Evil fans and even those who prefer the more action-oriented style of the later ones. Short, spooky, and invites further replays with some neat unlockables and further story developments that are sure to get you for one more round in a dollhouse. Offering the same type of experience as the likes of Deadly Premonition, it falls into that category of game that might lack some refinements, but it will be hard for the passion and dedication behind all of the little details to not charm you in the long run. Have in mind that while I finished playing through all of it, the developer went ahead and patched it 3 more times, so it's possible that this receives further improvements that clear a few more of my contrivances. With all of that said, I can only offer the developer my best wishes, as I will keep an eye for his future works, as they are sure to be worth a wait.